Okay, well, I've called this talk Fortress Britain because I've just written a report recently with that title for the New Economics Foundation. And I first became really interested in this topic about 5, 6, 7 years ago, when I was invited by Manchester City Council to do a coach tour of the poorest parts of the city, sort of poverty safari or kind of poverty tourism, where this bunch of experts was gathered together and we were all put on the coach and we were taken around to see, the really, really most deprived parts of Manchester. We weren't even allowed to get off the coach, actually. We sort of saw it all from our, sort of high tier with a guide explaining to us where we were. And as the coach swept into a particularly deprived estate in a part of Manchester called Collyhurst. Actually, I think it's being filmed by BBC Three at the moment for a slightly dubious series called People Like Us, about what it's like to be poor. But anyway, our coach swept into this estate in Collyhurst, and literally everyone on the bus just gasped in shock. And there was a square in the centre of this estate, and it was surrounded by 30-foot high railings. And at one end, there was a council building, which was just totally militarised. I mean, it looked like something that you'd see in a war zone. And I was just really shocked by this. Why was this the sort of, why did the public space in this area and the public buildings look like this? And actually, a few years later, as I was travelling around Britain researching a book I wrote a few years ago called Ground Control, it seemed to me that high security was becoming a feature of everywhere that I visited. For example, I'd get off the train at Liverpool Lime Street station and tannoy announcements would say that security guards were patrolling the station. You get off the train at Liverpool and you get into a cab. Even the cabs have CCTV in them. In the centre of Liverpool, Liverpool One, if any of you know it, entirely privately owned, privately controlled, open air shopping mall, private security guards, CCTV patrolling every inch of the site, as I was proudly told. And then in more deprived parts of Liverpool, drones, the unmanned spy planes used in Iraq and Afghanistan, and now modified for civilian use, police those parts of the city. And what really became clear to me is that very high security is especially a feature of very poor and very wealthy places in this country. It's a visual marker and a reflection in the landscape of sharply widening inequalities. But actually, that was sort of quite a few years ago now. It seemed particularly the case in very poor and very wealthy areas. Actually, it's becoming a feature of all our public buildings and public places. And it's something I noticed particularly when I became a parent. And I remember taking my baby to the baby centre in the children's centre, and the children's centre had these 20-foot high gates, and sort of remote controlled entrance, really high security. And I said to the receptionist, being obviously interested in this subject and a bit of a pain, I said, why do you need this level of security? It's intrusive, it's not nice. And she said, well, it's there to protect the children. How could I possibly question this? So I really wanted to look at, why has this happened? And, I'm absolutely determined my viewpoint is absolutely that this is not as a result of some sort of public outcry, that we all want these very high levels of security. It's the result of a mix of unintended consequences, one of which is a policy that probably few of you have heard of called Secured by Design, which is a police-backed design policy funded by the private security industry, which has now swept into policy making and actually planning permission for all public buildings and public places is now dependent on achieving these secured by design standards. And that combined with the rollout of the privatisation of public spaces, of public places, the sort of the Liverpool One, Canary Wharf type model, and the terrorism agenda is leading increasingly to this high security environment. You know, and so what's the outcome? Whoops. Yeah, I mean, this is a housing estate which won a secured by design award. But, you know, to me, these aluminium steel doors and roofs and small windows and CCTV, you know, this is not an award-winning environment at all. How do I point this? Yeah, this is a school. This is a school in Brixton, near where I live. It's not even a particularly high security environment, but schools have become very high security places. I mean, it bears no relationship to the sort of place I went to school in 20 or so years ago, because this is a factory which makes fencing. And the guy who works there told the photographer who was working on the project with me, we started off doing things like prisons, airports, high security environments, and now we're increasingly doing more schools and multi-use games areas, i.e. playgrounds. So you can see, you know, the extent to which this agenda is really sweeping through every aspect of the way we live. And this slide I particularly found bizarre. You know, even the CCTV camera has got its own little barbed wire encasement. And I'll just this is a new housing development, actually private housing development in Salford. I mean, what a sort of alienating environment to live in. But of course, it's not, as I said, just very poor and very poor areas and very wealthy areas. It's basically the template for all new housing design in the UK today. How familiar is that sort of apartment block with its gates, and there'll probably be a guard in a sentry box somewhere inside and CCTV. This is just standard. But the problem is security is not a straightforward subject. It really is paradoxical, and it's counterintuitive. Of course, you know, the better it works, the less it should be necessary. But actually the opposite is the case. And this was well illustrated to me by a woman I met called Monica, who had lived on a normal terrace street for 20 years or so, and actually moved into a gated development because it was the only house she could find on the market. And what she found one night, that the electronic gates on her development went wrong, and they had to be propped open. And she said she spent all night lying awake, feeling really, really scared, even though her door was locked and she had exactly the same level of security from the outside world as she'd ever had. But that extra layer had been removed, and she really couldn't cope with that. I don't really have enough time to talk about everything I'd like to talk about, but really just to sort of summarise. Fear of crime has no relationship at all with actual crime. It's related directly to trust. And the problem is, with all these external controls, they're undermining the unconscious interactions that occur between people in the city, between strangers walking through the streets of the city. All these external controls are undermining that, and they're undermining the sense of trust between people, and hence fear of crime is on the rise. And these solutions, unfortunately, are in fact very much part of the problem. I mean, you know, I think we are coming to a point when we're starting to question this security culture. Partly the Olympics, in a way, paradoxically, were helpful in that. We saw the collapse of G4S, the whole row over surface-to-air missiles in on apartment blocks surrounding the Olympics. You know, we're starting to have a discussion about it, but really we've reached a point where, you know, this high security culture, which really is not the same in the rest of Europe at all, it's very much a British phenomenon, and to some extent an American phenomenon. You know, it's something that we really need to start having a proper debate about, rather than just sleepwalking into it. So thanks very much.